In 1947, one speech not only impacted the Cold War, but also changed the course of world history as we know it. The United States was not just promising aid, it was declaring a global mission. This was the Truman Doctrine. But what was it really about? Why did it matter so much? And how did it reshape America's role in the world? Let's get into it. All right, welcome back. So this is a topic that I have gone over in the past on this channel. I have a couple other videos kind of around this whole idea, but I wanted to make one more, not only from the HL perspective, but to cover some of my SL friends as well. This video is going to be on the Truman Doctrine. So, like I said before, let's just get right into it. So, a little bit of context for you guys, right? Truman Doctrine. Hopefully you've watched some of my previous videos that I've recorded over the past 2 weeks. This is after the Potsdam Conference, right? You can definitely make a claim that the Potsdam Conference started the Cold War. That's a totally acceptable claim to make. I personally think that this is what started the Cold War. Potsdam set the stage, but the Truman Doctrine is going to really start the Cold War, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. All right. But what you have to understand outside the context of just Potsdam is Europe is destroyed by the Second World War, right? Economically, politically, it is in shambles, right? The United States realizes that. They also realize that there is a power vacuum, okay? The British are not what they used to be. They were so decimated by the combination of the Great Depression, the Second World War, and now the fact that their empire seems to be crumbling with more and more independence movements. They are not in a position to be the world superpower, the world power anymore, because now the United States has emerged as a superpower. All right. At the time that all of this is going on in the Western world, in the Eastern European world, we've got Soviet expansion, all right? We're in the middle of salami tactics where Joseph Stalin is carving up Eastern Europe and incorporating these nations into his communist sphere known as the USSR. All right. There's civil war going on in Greece, which was a country that was incredibly backed by Britain that Britain couldn't keep a hold of anymore. There's pressure on Turkey over allowing the Soviet Union to access the Dardanelles Straits, which is one of the most important waterways in the world. All right. Again, Britain couldn't support these two, allies anymore, so the United States feared that if both of these places go in the wrong direction, they might too fall like the rest of Eastern Europe to communist influence, and something needed to be done about that. So Harry Truman is going to give a speech. All right, this speech is to ask for what's known as the Greece and Turkey Aid Bill. All right. Here's a quote from that speech. I'm not going to read it to you. You can definitely pause it. But this is one of the big excerpts from what is known as the Truman Doctrine speech. All right. Some of the key points of the speech. Truman now essentially asserts the United States as the world police force. All right. That they have the duty to support free people that are being subjugated to a form of government that they never agreed to, right? And this is somewhat fair, right? Because if we know about salami tactics, we know some of the Eastern European countries did not want to be communist. Some did. They never got the vote. Going back to Yalta Potsdam, they never got the ability to vote on what they wanted to do, but we know that some of them would have voted that way regardless, all right? Truman is going to frame this as a struggle between freedom and tyranny. All right. Again, the original speech is to ask for money for Greece and Turkey. It's called the Greece and Turkey Aid Bill. It's going to send $400 million over to Greece and Turkey to help them rebuild after the war. This is a key moment in U.S. history because we just made the connection that financial assistance is the number one thing we could do to battle communism. All right? That poor countries are more susceptible to turn communist Their governments can't keep control of their population. So if we give those governments money, they can more easily control their population, more easily provide for their population, and communism is less likely to happen. That is a huge, huge, huge deal. All right. The Truman Doctrine is going to be the biggest shift in U.S. foreign policy of all time. We go from a mostly isolationist state to a state of global intervention. All right. This is why I think the Truman Doctrine is the start of the Cold War. It is the declaration of war against communism. All right. When I teach it, I like to summarize the Truman Doctrine in one simple phrase: the United States will do whatever it takes, both financially and militarily, to stop the spread of communism. All right. This is the debut of the United States policy of containment. All right. So, again, the United States will do whatever it takes, both financially and militarily, to stop the spread of communism. Now, the number one foreign policy objective of the United States moving forward after 1947 is to limit the spread of communism. All right, Truman, that's why I'm saying that this is the start of the Cold War. It's the declaration of war on the ideology of communism. We cannot allow it to spread any farther than it already has. All right. So again, everything that I just said could be summarized into the term, the policy of containment. We needed to contain communism and not allow it to continue its spread. All right. Up to this point, the Cold War has been primarily ideological and geopolitical. All right. With the Soviet Union expanding into Eastern Europe and the politics there. Truman, with this doctrine, expands it into an economic and military rival as well. That's why I like to use those terms, both financially and militarily. All right. And he will be tested on both of those fronts within the next 3 years. All right. He's tested with the Berlin blockade financially, if he's financially willing to support that idea of limiting communist spread. And then he's tested in 1950 in Korea. All right, is he militarily going to back up that statement of containment, right? So that's why the Truman Doctrine is so important, and that's why I like to associate those two words with it. Financially and militarily stop the spread of communism, containment, all right? The Truman Doctrine is going to force America's hand in a couple of things, all right? It sets way for the Marshall Plan. That's going to be the tool the United States uses to financially battle communism in Western Europe, all right? It kind of interjects them into this new alliance known as NATO, and it also puts them in Korea, Vietnam, and then later on Latin American politics exclusively, all right? You can't understand the Truman Doctrine very well if you don't understand or don't know about the long telegram. All right, so the long telegram is going to be a telegram sent by George Kennan. He is an American a diplomat in the Baltics at the time that this was sent, but he was a specialist on U.S.-Moscow relations. All right. He essentially comes up with the word containment. All right. When I teach the long telegram, I like to do word association. Remember two words when you think of the long telegram. The Soviet Union is dangerous and expansionist. The key word being expansionist, right? George Kennan is going to exclusively say that the Soviet Union is going to expand. They're going to keep on expanding globally unless we contain their ideas. All right. And he says, I gave you a key quote here. It's impervious to the logic of reason, but it's sensitive to the logic of force. All right. So this is what gives Truman that idea of adding that military component, that if we have to, we will start proxy wars, military interventions across the world to head the Soviet expansion, to face it head on. Right. Here's a long quote from the long telegram. Again, if you want to pause to read. There is George Kennan. I included that picture of him when he was older because the older he got, the more he regretted sending the long telegram. He believed what he wrote in the long telegram. He didn't agree with how the Truman administration interpreted it. All right. He wanted a more kind of tactical plan on how to combat Soviet expansionism, whereas Truman took it as like an overt policy. And that's where containment kind of takes a different turn of what Kennan was really expecting when he originally sent the long telegram. All right. Connection to the Truman Doctrine, right? The telegram gives this theoretical justification that America could take whatever action it needs to stop that Soviet expansion, right? This is where the containment policy comes from. Kennan used the word contain communist expansion, contain communist spread throughout the 8,000 word telegram, all right? And then I kind of like this cartoon because we see both of these sides, like both of the superpowers now clashing over what territory it's going to look to get and what territory it's looking to protect. That's why I like to call the Truman Doctrine in 47 the official start of the Cold War conflict. It is the declaration of war. It's not just an ideological battle anymore. It's going to have financial and military implications. All right. Last up, some historiography for you if you want to incorporate that into your papers. If you're an orthodox viewpoint, you are saying that the Truman Doctrine was necessary due to the already provided Soviet expansion, Soviet aggression. They've already been in Eastern Europe. Truman needed to respond. If you're a revisionist, you're going to say that Truman exaggerated, all right, and that used these small cases to justify this ever-expanding global power that is now the United States. All right. If you're a post-revisionist, you're going to say it's a mixture of both. All right, that both of the superpowers contributed to the Cold War tensions equally. All right, so that's some historiography for you and the three major schools of thought around the Cold War. All right, I hope this video helped. Again, I've done the Truman Doctrine stuff before, but it's so important to understanding the origins of the Cold War. It's so important from an HL perspective in history of the Americas. If you get a paper 2 question about the start of the Cold War, about the, Cold War crises, it's very hard to leave the Truman Doctrine out of that essay as some sort of evidence. So I wanted to do one more thing to talk about it with you guys before the exams kick off for this season. So again, Truman Doctrine. The United States will do whatever it takes, both financially and militarily, to stop the spread of communism. All right. It is, in my opinion, the declaration of war against the communist ideology. All right. Kennan's long telegram. The Soviet Union is dangerous and expansionist. He sets up the word containment and gives Truman the justification of what he's going to do next. All right. Again, I hope that helped. Good luck on your exams. Look out for another YouTube video coming probably in the beginning of the week next week. I'm not sure what it'll be on yet, but again, I'm hoping they're helping you guys. I did make a TikTok. I'm going to link it in the description below, and I'm making kind of shorter form videos there to, again, help you guys prep for your exam. All right. Again, good luck. Thanks for watching.